Hi. Some of you, at least 16 of you, may have been asking yourself, where is Angela's journey lately? Well, I have been in tech hell. I could tell you about my problems with disappearing files, corrupting files, video editors that weren't working, my visits to the Geek Squad. I could tell you about that. But instead, why don't we just carry on and start again? Now, the last time we talked, I had mentioned to you that my daughter had a mystery condition, and that I would explain to you what that was. And so today, I'm presenting that video that I actually filmed a couple of months ago and just haven't been able to get it loaded. So I think here we are. We're beginning again. I'm Angela. Thank you for being here on Angela's Journey. So, this condition, let me set the scene. We were living in Virginia, Leanna and I. We had just moved there. She had just started high school, 9th grade, and was very excited about her high school career. She had plans to be in the ROTC program. She wanted to join clubs, wanted to make new friends, and we were just so happy for her opportunities. So one time at work, and the phone rings, and it's the school. They said, your daughter fainted in guitar class. And I said, nah. Nah, are you sure? They said, yes, she fainted in guitar class. They're pretty emphatic. And I said, are you sure she's just not being dramatic? And they said, you need to come to the emergency room at the hospital. So I go dashing over to the emergency room. What happened, she actually was in guitar class and fainted, broke her guitar, and now she was in the emergency room. Once we were there, they didn't have an answer for why this had happened. So, of course, they did the usual test they give teenagers, especially girls. Drug tested her, pregnancy tested her, nothing. So they sent us home. Well, that was just the beginning of a nightmare that continued for years, and to this day. I began to get calls from school really regularly. Leanna fainted in class. She fainted on the track. She fainted at an event. She fainted in the hallway. And they always say the same thing. We've called the emergency room squad, and now you can meet her at the hospital. It happened again and again. There was no pattern to these faintings. No one could figure out why it was happening. All we know is that they were disruptive, they were embarrassing, they were dangerous, because fainting, you can really hurt yourself. It's not like the movies where you swoon into the arms of some handsome young man. No, this was dangerous stuff. So my first question to her when she fainted, when I was not there, I would ask her, who was with you? Because my fear was that she would faint in some spot and be alone and be lying there alone, and I was always afraid that would happen. But she also fainted with us, not just at school, but one day at a friend's house where we were having Thanksgiving. She fainted. She fainted in a restaurant on New Year's Eve. She fainted at the YMCA pool. She fainted at her brother's graduation luncheon. She actually fainted once in the emergency room. And once in the doctor's office, she fainted off of her chair that she was sitting in. So many weeks into this awfulness, I get another call from school, and they said, we're sending Leanna to the emergency room. She's fainted again. One of my coworkers who knew that this was going on looked me in the eye before I left that day, and she said to me words that changed our lives. She said, do not leave the emergency room. Refuse to leave unless they give you a diagnosis. I said, can you do that? Can you refuse to leave? She said, refuse to leave. So I get to the ER, and there's Leanna lying there on the bed, and she's got the sheet over her head, probably because the lights are bothering her. The ER doctor is saying the usual stuff, all the tests are normal, it's just stress. From under the sheet, Leanna says she's not going to like that, meaning me. Well, you've seen the Shirley MacLaine movie when she's trying to get meds for her daughter. Well, that was me. Get me somebody. Get me somebody who can tell me what's wrong with my daughter, because I'm not taking her out into the world again where she can faint in front of a bus or off the bleachers or what have you. Get me somebody. So the ER doctor left quickly, and she returns a few minutes later, and she said, I gotten a hold of a pediatric cardiologist, and he thinks he knows what the problem is. Can you go to his office tomorrow? Leanna and I, yes, absolutely. So the next day we're at the cardio's office. We discussed the symptoms. They did a test called a tilt table test and some other tests. And we were able to get a diagnosis then and there, and it's called POTS. We have POTS. Well, what's POTS? Postural orthostatic tachycardia. Well, I always say we because I feel like I'm right with Leanna every minute of her life with this struggle, and it always feels like what is happening to her is we. So we have POTS. Yay, we were happy for like 5 minutes. We have a diagnosis. We're not crazy. We're not crazy. There's a reason that this is happening. The bad news is that POTS is incurable, hard to manage, and really mysterious. At least that's what we knew in 2012. What we learned that also is that POTS makes it difficult to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is all the balances that are going on in your body that you have no control over, that you don't need to control, your heart rate and your blood pumping and all these other things. And POTS is not exactly a disease. It's kind of a collection of symptoms, which is why they call it a syndrome. POTS, for some reason, seems to affect teenagers, young people, especially females. They try to manage it with medications, but managing POTS is kind of like trying to manage the ocean. Here we are with this diagnosis, a cute little name, POTS, for terrible condition. It is characterized by so many symptoms, and this is the letter that our doctor wrote to us. I don't know whether it's coming across, confirming Leanna's diagnosis, and it says that some of the symptoms are lightheadedness, dizziness, chest pain, headaches, GI problems, brain fog, blurred vision, difficulty with recall, extreme fatigue, nausea, exercise intolerance, appetite disturbances, insomnia, and the one that's not even on here is fainting. That's what actually drove us to this doctor's office in the first place, was the fainting. So POTS, if you have it, your blood has problems circulating. It goes to the bottom of your limbs, mainly to your feet, and then it has trouble coming back up. So therefore your heart starts to beat, your blood pressure goes down, and the next thing you know, you're fainting. How do you get POTS? Well, there are various opinions, and again, a lot of this is what we knew in 2012. So there seems to be a combination of factors that will induce POTS, prompted by a physical or emotional trauma, a history of antibiotics, and a genetic disposition. Well, check, and check. Leanna had all of those scenarios going on. She had lived on antibiotics as a child because she was a chronic sinus infection. She had physical and emotional traumas because she was bullied her whole life. She had dyslexia. She had asthma and allergies, and she had a genetic disposition that we didn't know about. More about that later. Let's back up just a bit to when Leanna was growing up. We used to call her the Princess and the Pea because everything bothered her. She was hypersensitive to sight, sound, light, touch, taste, temperature, all these things. She had GI issues. She was a picky eater. She was always eating salt, which we thought was a bad thing. Well, fast forward to the day in the doctor's office when we received that diagnosis. Suddenly, all of those mysterious habits of hers or problems came into focus because of POTS. Now we knew why she was doing all those things and why all those things that we didn't understand, and we knew why she was eating salt, because it is a condition that makes you crave salt, or actually salt actually helps, which is exactly the opposite of most people who shouldn't be eating salt. So life as we knew it in 2012 officially changed. Our life was filled with ER visits to the pharmacy, where we were on first name basis with the pharmacist. We were on first name basis with the paramedics who came to transport Leanna so many times. One time we were in Target, and I guess I felt brave enough to let Leanna go look at something on her own, a few bits, on the other side of the store. So I am sitting in the coffee shop area just waiting for her to come back. And suddenly I hear my name over the speaker to go to a certain part of the store. And I arrive there, and there's my daughter on the floor, surrounded by paramedics. Now, how did all this happen without me knowing that she had fainted, without me knowing that they had called the paramedics, that they had arrived, and there was all this drama going on in the stationery section of Target? But here's the funny part. Well, funny, sort of. When the paramedics arrived to Target, one of them said, "Oh, hi, Leanna. So many challenges going on, and they got worse." Between the challenges of her school life and trying to keep her going academically and socially, that really became difficult. Dealing with doctors, many doctors, and now you're suddenly seeing specialists after specialists after specialists, and really it's not helping very much, because a lot of the specialists we had to go to had never even heard of POTS. Again, this is 2012. we were fighting with the insurance to try to get medications for her, and then the insurance kept changing because of different reasons, and that was another headache. And just trying to keep Leanna engaged in life while she was so sick was very hard. It was hard to get her to go with us places. She was tired, she was sick. So we used to go to dinners or movies or church, and it was often she was not with us for these things, and it made us sad. In 2012, what we realized is there was probably about 6 specialists in the country who dealt with POTS. The miracle of it was we had moved to Northern Virginia, and one of the specialists was in Northern Virginia. And we were so grateful for that, because when we would go to see this specialist, this doctor, the one who diagnosed her, there would be people in the waiting room in the office that were coming from states away. I mean, they were driving hours and hours to come and see this doctor. And so we felt really grateful, and that a miracle had happened, that we happened to have landed in this same town. But of course, when we arrived to this doctor's office, because of the nature that he was the only person, I think, in the close by eastern United States, we used to wait for hours in that waiting room. Hours and hours you could be there waiting for your turn to see the doctor. The other thing about that waiting room is that when you walked in, it was usually filled with cute teenage girls and their mothers. So when we would get to talking in the waiting room and asking people, well, where are you from, and how's your case going, and every case was different. What worked for one person didn't work for another. Here's the similarity that was going on with all of the cases for all the people that we met with POTS or any autoimmune condition, is that it took years to get the diagnosis. Years. And a lot of suffering. Very sad. So, POTS affects every function in your body. We had to see so many doctors: cardio, neuro, gastro, rheumatologists, sleep doctors, dermatologists, just so many doctors. Even though we now had a diagnosis, we had been treated for years like we were crazy. And they looked at us like we were making things up, or that we were just enjoying, like I was some kind of, what's that mother syndrome where you like to have a sick kid. I mean, honestly, I think the doctors in Miami that we saw, and some of the doctors in Virginia that we saw, I think they looked at me just like that. But one of the things I did once we had the diagnosis was I wrote a letter to doctors in Miami that had seen Leanna while we were there, the ones that we had gone to with all these mysterious things that were going on in her body, and they did nothing. And this included her pediatrician, an endocrinologist, a dermatologist, a pulmonologist, a neurologist, cardiology, psychiatry, and a dietitian. I wrote these folks a joint letter. And I said, basically, you're receiving this letter because my daughter was in your care, and she presented with these symptoms, and we were told she was just normal and that it was just stress. Well, we've gotten a diagnosis for this condition, and it's called POTS. I gave them, in the letter, I gave them the name of the doctor and the contact information for his practice. I also gave them some websites that were popping up that were talking about this condition. And I said, I am taking the time out of my busy schedule to communicate with you in order to help others avoid the delay and the frustration and the suffering and the feeling crazy that we experienced. One day in Miami, we were asked by one of you doctors, why are you really here? So I didn't share their names, but I did share the fact that there were different specialties, and I wanted them all to see how the reality of what we were dealing with was legitimate, and that there were so many specialties, all of whom missed it. So one day in a Zumba class, I was talking to another mom, and her child also had an autoimmune condition. She mentioned to me that she knew a doctor, a Chinese doctor, that I may want to go see, that we may want to see. And I was at the time not ready. I said, you know, right now I believe in our doctor, the one who diagnosed her. I wanted to stick with him, and I thanked her for the information. And she said something to me. She said, well, I think someday you're going to want this information. And that's exactly what happened. POTS created desperation on the parts of the patients and the parts of the parents. The parents were compelled into advocacy for this weird syndrome. One parent that we knew arranged for a POTS day in our community, and they made a proclamation that was meant to bring some awareness about this, about POTS into the community. Other parents began an annual conference, growing all the time, bigger and better all the time, and that conference is I remember the first one, and it was at the beginning of a very important awareness and information sharing event. Leanne and I actually started a support group because at the time we wanted people to be able to share about what was going on with their condition and in their lives. Every month on a Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock-ish, parents and some kids would come in, and we'd get to share what was going on with us. It was helpful. I think anytime you're proactive about your situation, whatever that is, it's a good thing. But one day, it was funny, we were at school. Leanna had fainted and was in the nurse's office lying down on a cot. I was called to school, so I'm in the nurse's office, and we are discussing what's happening with Leanna and some of the other kids, because there were other kids at that school who were also diagnosed with POTS. The security guard, who happened to be in the room or within earshot, he says, hey, do you guys know about this support group that meets over at the Y for people with POTS? And Leanne and I kind of looked at each other and smiled, because we said, oh, he's talking about us. He's talking about the group that we started. That made us smile. The other thing I was able to do, is a part of my attempt for awareness, is I was able to arrange a radio program on iHeartRadio, which aired in the Maryland, Northern Virginia, DC area. And I was sat with one of the vice presidents of the Dysautonomia awareness group that had grown up. And so we got to talk about POTS with my friend Bernie at iHeart. Thank you, Bernie, so much for giving us that time on air. So we were all doing what we could do to help our children and other people's children. One day, a couple of years into all of this awfulness, we're at a doctor's appointment with our diagnosing POTS cardiologist, and he fired us. He fired us. He said, today is your last appointment. What? We thought this man was God, and God was firing us. And he walked out of the room. So Leanne and I kind of floated out to the parking lot, because we were sort of stunned. And the realization that we were doctorless with a mysterious medical condition is hitting us. And two thoughts came to mind, and this is what I said to my child. I said, Leanna, there's got to be another way. This, what just happened, is the universe's way of telling us there's another way. That day, our journey began into alternative medicine, Chinese medicine, holistic medicine. The other words I said were